Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. It was New Year's Eve, and I was trying to enjoy the little tradition Lisa and I had kept alive for 7 years. Just the two of us at home, champagne ready to pop at midnight. She seemed distracted, her phone lighting up constantly with notifications. She'd brush them off, muttering about group chats or work friends. I tried to ignore the pit forming in my stomach. Around 11 p.m., I caught sight of a faint red mark on her neck when she bent over to grab more snacks from the table. I froze. It wasn't her perfume, her dress, or the way she had done her hair that made my heart sink. It was that mark. "Hey, what's that on your neck?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She flinched slightly, her fingers instinctively brushing over it. "Oh, this? It's nothing. Probably a bug bite or something." She laughed nervously. "Too much. A bug bite. In December. On her neck." "Right," I said, not wanting to push it. But something in her eyes, the way she avoided meeting mine, told me there was more. The countdown to midnight came and went, but my head was spinning. After we kissed and toasted to the new year, I excused myself, pretending to be tired. Lisa stayed up, scrolling on her phone. Lying in bed, I wrestled with myself. I wanted to trust her. God knows I'd trusted her with everything for 7 years. But that hickey wouldn't leave my mind. When she finally came to bed, hours later, she whispered, "I love you, Mark," before drifting off to sleep. I didn't respond. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, wondering what other secrets were hiding behind her sleepy smile. The morning after New Year's, Lisa acted like everything was normal. She hummed while making coffee, casually scrolling through her phone like the night before hadn't raised every red flag in my head. I watched her, trying to figure out if I was imagining things. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it really was just a bug bite. But then she got a text, and her face changed. Just for a second. She glanced at me like she thought I'd seen, then set her phone face down on the counter. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. "Who's texting you so early?" I asked casually, masking the knot tightening in my chest. "Work stuff," she said too quickly, not looking up. "You know how it is after the holidays. Everyone catching up." Her job as a project manager did mean constant communication, but on a holiday morning? Her excuse didn't sit right. "Must be urgent," I said, keeping my tone even. She shrugged, clearly wanting to end the conversation. "Nothing I can't handle later. Anyway, what do you want for breakfast?" I mumbled something about toast and went to grab my laptop. I needed space to think. Lisa had always been charming, confident, and a little too good at spinning stories. It was one of the things I loved about her when we met. She could turn a dull day into an adventure, a small moment into a memory. But now, that charm felt like a weapon she was wielding against me. The rest of the day was strained. I couldn't stop watching her. Every smile she gave me seemed too perfect, like she was working harder to convince me that everything was fine. By the evening, I couldn't take it anymore. After she went to take a shower, I sat on the couch, staring at her phone still on the counter. My hands itched. I had never been the kind of guy to invade her privacy, but something about that mark, her behavior, it wasn't adding up. My heart pounded as I picked it up, hoping I was wrong. Her lock screen lit up, and there it was, a notification from someone named M. It wasn't a name I recognized. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." I froze. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. 1,000 scenarios ran through my head, each worse than the last. I wanted to yell to confront her, but instead, I put the phone down exactly where she'd left it and walked outside. The winter air bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I needed to breathe, to think. This wasn't just a bad feeling anymore. This was real. When Lisa came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and smiling like nothing had happened, I knew I couldn't bring it up. Not yet. I needed a plan. I wasn't about to let her gaslight me or twist the story. "Everything okay?" she asked, catching me staring. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." She nodded, not pushing further. That night, lying in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. My mind was already racing ahead, mapping out my next steps. Whatever Lisa had done, or was still doing, I wasn't going to let her turn me into the bad guy. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about making sure I came out of this on my own terms. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and quiet observations. Lisa continued to act normal, maybe even a little sweeter than usual, bringing me coffee in the mornings, asking about my day. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was trying to reassure me. But every time she glanced at her phone or excused herself to take a call in the other room, my chest tightened. I couldn't confront her yet, not without more evidence. Lisa was good at twisting the narrative. If I went in unprepared, she'd flip it on me, make me seem paranoid or controlling. I needed proof, something undeniable. That night, after she fell asleep, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling again. My mind was made up. Carefully, I slipped out of bed and headed to the living room, where she'd left her phone charging. I picked it up, trying to steady my hands as I unlocked it. Lisa wasn't cautious. She used the same passcode for everything. The Messages app was where I started, scrolling until I found M. My breath hitched as I opened the thread. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? Last night was perfect. The messages went back weeks. My stomach churned as I read through them, every word cutting deeper. Whoever M was, they weren't just some random fling. The way they talked to each other, it was intimate, familiar, like they'd been doing this for a while. Then I saw a message from Lisa. I can't talk right now. He's home. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. That wasn't just betrayal, it was a reminder that she knew exactly what she was doing, hiding it from me while living in the home we'd built together. I thought about taking screenshots, but something stopped me. If I acted too soon, I'd tip her off. Instead, I opened the camera roll. There were a few innocuous pictures of us, but as I scrolled further, my heart sank. Hidden between photos of holiday decorations and selfies were pictures of her and M, at a bar, in a car, even one of them kissing. The timestamp on that one was Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. I felt the room tilt as the realization hit me. While I was wrapping her presents, trying to make the holiday special, she was sneaking off with this guy. I copied the photos to a flash drive I kept for work and returned her phone to the charger. She didn't stir when I crawled back into bed, but I didn't sleep a second that night. The next morning, I called out sick from work. Lisa didn't question it. She was busy scrolling on her phone, probably texting him. I spent the day organizing everything. I printed out the photos, the messages, everything I'd found. I even started looking into lawyers and securing my finances. If Lisa thought she was going to manipulate me into staying or get away with blindsiding me, she had another thing coming. By the time she got home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, calm on the outside but raging inside. "How was your day?" she asked, setting her purse down. "Fine," I said, smiling just enough to keep her from suspecting anything. She leaned in to kiss me, and I let her, even though it made my skin crawl. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more time to finalize my exit strategy. As Lisa busied herself with dinner, humming a tune like everything was perfect, I realized something. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Over the next week, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Lisa carried on as if nothing was wrong, but I couldn't unsee the messages, the photos, the betrayal. Every time she laughed at something on her phone or smiled at me across the dinner table, my jaw clenched. I'd started playing the part, nodding along, cracking jokes, even hugging her when she leaned into me. But inside, I was focused, calculating my next moves. I couldn't afford to let her see any cracks in the facade. That Friday, I left work early and went to meet a lawyer. He came recommended by a friend, someone discreet, no nonsense. I walked into his office with a file of evidence and left with a roadmap. "The key here is to stay calm," he said as I was leaving. "The more controlled you are, the less she can twist things against you." It was good advice, but staying calm was easier said than done. Every time I saw her phone light up or heard her laughing while texting, I had to grip the counter or take a breath to keep myself from snapping. On Sunday, Lisa said she needed to run errands. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but this time, I had my doubts. As soon as she left, I grabbed my phone and checked the GPS tracker I'd installed on her car. Sure enough, she wasn't heading to the grocery store like she'd claimed. She was driving across town, stopping at what I quickly realized was a hotel. I clenched my fists but forced myself to stay seated. Confronting her there and then would accomplish nothing. She'd lie, twist the story, and somehow turn herself into the victim. No, I had to stick to my plan. I spent the next hour gathering the rest of what I needed: banking information, passwords, and anything else that would ensure I came out of this as unscathed as possible. When Lisa came home later, she acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. The store was packed, she said, unloading groceries she'd clearly picked up as a cover. But I got everything we need for the week. Thanks, I said, keeping my voice light. Want to do a movie night later? Her eyes lit up, and she nodded. Sounds perfect. We sat on the couch that evening, her head resting on my shoulder, a bowl of popcorn between us. I felt like I was watching someone else's life. How could she be so at ease, so comfortable, knowing what she was doing behind my back? As the credits rolled, she looked up at me and smiled. I'm really glad we're starting the year off like this. Feels good, doesn't it? Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. It really does. But inside, I was counting down the days. I had everything I needed now: evidence, legal advice, financial security. The only thing left was timing. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. If she thought she could cheat, lie, and walk away with no consequences, she was in for a rude awakening. She might not know it yet, but her perfect little bubble was about to burst. By the middle of the next week, I'd ironed out the final details. I had an account set up in my name, all our joint funds quietly split down the middle. I moved the things that mattered most, important documents, personal mementos, to a storage unit. Every step felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. But I wasn't going to let Lisa's betrayal blindside me any more than it already had. On Thursday night, I decided to test the waters. Lisa was in the kitchen, sipping wine while scrolling on her phone. I leaned against the counter, casually watching her. Hey, I said, keeping my tone light. Do you think we should plan a little weekend getaway soon? Just the two of us. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening slightly. Oh, sure, she said quickly. That sounds nice. Things have just been so hectic lately, you know? Work's been crazy. Yeah, I know, I said, smiling just enough to mask my doubt. That's why I thought we could use a break. She nodded, taking a long sip of her wine. Let me check my schedule. Maybe next month. Next month. In her mind, that was probably just enough time to keep me pacified while she continued sneaking around. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. Lisa stayed up, texting and scrolling as usual. When I was sure she wasn't coming to bed anytime soon, I crept into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Pulling out my phone, I opened the tracker I'd set up on hers a few days ago. I hated sinking to that level, but I needed confirmation. Sure enough, her messages with M continued, planning their next meetup, complimenting each other, sharing inside jokes. The latest one made my blood run cold. Can't wait to have you all to myself this weekend. Same hotel. My jaw clenched, and I had to sit down to keep from throwing the phone. This was it. The final nail. I sent myself screenshots of the messages and returned her phone to its exact spot. She'd never know. The next day, while she was at work, I made my move. I met with my lawyer again, handing over everything I'd gathered. This is solid, he said, flipping through the stack of evidence. It's going to make things much easier for you when the time comes to file. When? I asked. I'm ready now. He nodded. I'll draft the papers today. You just have to decide how and when you want to serve her. That evening, I acted like nothing had changed. Lisa came home late, claiming she'd been stuck in a meeting. I nodded along, keeping my face neutral. Long day, she asked, kissing my cheek like she hadn't spent her lunch break texting another man. Yeah, pretty long, I said, meeting her eyes. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the familiar pang of hurt or confusion. I felt clarity. That weekend, Lisa told me she had to work on Saturday. Big client project, she explained, avoiding my gaze. I'll probably be gone most of the day. I smiled. Take your time. I'll keep busy. As she left, dressed a little too nicely for a supposed work meeting, I waited a few minutes before heading out myself. This time, I wasn't following her. I didn't need to. I was going to make sure her lies caught up with her. By the end of the weekend, the papers would be ready. And so would I. Saturday came, and Lisa left around 10 a.m. Her excuse about work had been as flimsy as ever, but I played along, giving her a kiss on the cheek before she left. Don't work too hard, I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Always, she replied, flashing me one of her charming, practiced smiles. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my phone and double-checked the tracker. Just as I suspected, she wasn't heading to her office. Instead, she was going to the same hotel where the texts with M had pointed. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been at first. I was resolved. This was the day everything would change. I'd already called the lawyer that morning to confirm that the papers were ready. They'd be served on Monday, but I needed one more move to finalize my plan. Grabbing my laptop, I sent an email to her parents. I'd always had a good relationship with them, and I wanted to make sure they heard the truth from me, not some twisted version Lisa would undoubtedly try to sell them. The email was polite but direct. I explained what I had discovered, attaching a few of the more damning screenshots as evidence. I ended it by saying I hoped they would still support me through this, even if Lisa chose not to take responsibility for her actions. After that, I called my best friend, Jake. He'd been my rock through this whole mess, one of the few people I trusted to keep my secrets. "It's happening," I said when he picked up. "She's out with him now." "Man," Jake sighed, his tone heavy. "You good?" "Better than I thought I'd be," I admitted. "I'm ready to be done with this." We talked for a while longer, Jake reassuring me that I was doing the right thing. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter, like the weight of Lisa's lies was already starting to lift. When she came home that evening, she was glowing. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly tousled. I noticed she had a small gift bag in her hand, something she tried to casually slip onto the counter as she greeted me. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Exhausting," she said, running a hand through her hair. "But productive. I think we're finally making progress on that project." I nodded, pretending to be impressed. "That's great. You deserve a break tonight. Want me to order takeout?" "That sounds perfect," she said, flashing me a smile. We ate in the living room, her curled up next to me on the couch as if nothing had changed. She asked about my day, and I told her about a fictional errand I'd run, playing my role to perfection. As the night wore on, she seemed more at ease, even affectionate. She kissed me goodnight with a tenderness that almost felt real, and for a moment, I wondered how I'd been fooled for so long. Once she was asleep, I went to my office and made one final check of everything I'd prepared. The lawyer had confirmed the papers were ready to be served first thing Monday morning, and I had all my belongings safely tucked away in storage. This was it. When Monday came, Lisa would walk into the storm she'd created, and I would walk away, free from her lies, her betrayal, and the life we'd pretended to have. Monday morning came with an eerie calm. Lisa was in her usual routine, making coffee, scrolling on her phone, completely unaware of what was coming. I sat at the table, sipping my coffee and watching her, wondering if she could feel the tension in the air. "You okay?" she asked, glancing at me. "Yeah," I said with a slight smile. "Just thinking about the week ahead." She nodded and turned back to her phone, oblivious. At 9 a.m. sharp, there was a knock at the door. Lisa frowned, glancing at me as if to ask if I was expecting someone. I shook my head. "Probably a delivery," I said, standing to answer it. Instead of a package, it was the process server. He handed me a thick envelope, smiled politely, and left. I walked back into the kitchen, holding the envelope in my hand. "What's that?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed. I sat down across from her and slid it onto the table. "You might want to open it," I said calmly. Her confusion turned to nervousness as she picked it up, carefully tearing the seal. As she pulled out the divorce papers, her face went pale. What is this?" she stammered, flipping through the pages. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said evenly. "I'm done, Lisa. I know about the affair. I know about M." Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, wide with panic. "Mark, it's not what you think." I held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Don't insult me by lying any more than you already have. I have everything: texts, photos, proof of your little hotel meetups. It's over, Lisa." For a moment, she just sat there, stunned. Then her face crumpled, and the tears started. "Mark, please, I'm sorry," she sobbed, reaching across the table for my hand. "It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." I pulled my hand back, shaking my head. "It meant enough for you to sneak around for weeks. It meant enough for you to throw away 7 years of marriage." She stood up, her tears quickly turning to anger. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're not perfect either, Mark. You've been distant, focused on work, not paying attention to me. And that's your excuse? I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. That's your justification for cheating on me? If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. Instead, you decided to betray me behind my back. Lisa faltered, her anger deflating as the reality of the situation sank in. I didn't want to lose you, she said quietly. I didn't want it to end like this. Well, you should have thought about that before, I said, standing up. The papers are straightforward. I've already split our accounts, and I'm moving out today. There's nothing left to talk about. Her tears came back in full force as she realized I was serious. Please, Mark, we can work through this, she begged. We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away over one mistake. I stared at her, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. You threw it away, Lisa. Not me. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. My bags were already packed and in my car. As I left the house for the last time, I didn't look back. The sun was shining, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like it was mocking me. I felt free. Lisa might have thought she could manipulate her way out of this, but she was wrong. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, take it from me again. I drove to the storage unit first, unloading the few personal belongings I'd taken from the house, family photos, my favorite books, and the watch my dad had given me on my wedding day. That watch had been a painful reminder of what I thought my marriage stood for, but now, it felt like a symbol of something else, a fresh start. From there, I headed to Jake's place. He'd offered his guest room until I figured out my next steps. When I arrived, he was already waiting on the porch, 2 beers in hand. You did it, huh? He said, handing me a bottle. It's done, I replied, exhaling heavily as I sat down beside him. Papers are served. She didn't take it well. Jake snorted. Of course she didn't. People like her never think they'll face consequences. You good? I took a long sip of beer before answering. Better than I thought I'd be. It hurts, but it's a different kind of hurt, you know? Like ripping off a band-aid. Yeah, but this band-aid was holding together a wound she caused, Jake said bluntly. She's got no one to blame but herself. He wasn't wrong, but it didn't make the ache in my chest any easier to ignore. Still, being away from the house, away from Lisa, was a relief. After unloading my bags into the guest room, I sat down with Jake to go over my next steps. We talked about everything, finding a new apartment, sorting out the logistics of the divorce, even rebuilding my social life. You're going to be fine, man, Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder. This isn't the end for you. It's just the beginning. That night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The pain was still there, sure, but it was mixed with something else, hope. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts from Lisa. Mark, please, let's talk. I can't believe you left like this. You're not even giving me a chance to explain. We can fix this. Don't throw away everything we've built. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number. My lawyer had advised me to keep communication minimal and through official channels, and that's exactly what I intended to do. Later that day, I got a call from Lisa's mother. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. Mark, it's Evelyn, she said, her voice soft. I don't even know what to say. Lisa told me what happened. I'm so sorry. I was silent for a moment, caught off guard by her sincerity. You have nothing to apologize for, Evelyn, I said finally. This isn't on you. I don't understand why she would do something like this, Evelyn continued, her voice breaking. She told me it was a mistake, but mistakes like that don't just happen. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I don't know if I'll ever understand it either. But I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I just want you to know we're here for you, she said. You'll always be part of our family, no matter what happens. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Her words felt like a balm on a wound I didn't realize I needed to tend to. After the call, I felt lighter, like I wasn't alone in this. Lisa might have shattered the life we'd built together, but I wasn't starting from scratch. I had people in my corner, people who believed in me, even if she didn't. For the first time since New Year's, I allowed myself to imagine what life might look like on the other side of this mess. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to rebuild. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. By midweek, the reality of my departure had clearly set in for Lisa. I could tell by the emails flooding my inbox, each one more desperate than the last. "Mark, I'm begging you. Let's talk. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Please don't throw us away. I love you." I didn't reply. Each message felt like a punch to the gut, not because I missed her, but because of the audacity. She hadn't loved me when she was sneaking off to hotels. Now, faced with the consequences of her actions, she was scrambling to rewrite the story. Lisa wasn't the only one reaching out. Word of our separation had spread, and friends, many of whom we'd shared as a couple, started calling and texting. Some messages were supportive. "If you need anything, I'm here." Others were more intrusive. "What happened?" I heard some rumors. One mutual friend, Michelle, even tried to mediate. "Mark, I know things look bad," she said during a phone call, "but don't you think you owe Lisa a conversation? You've been together so long." I clenched my jaw. "I owe her nothing," I replied evenly. "She made her choices. I'm just dealing with the fallout." There was a long pause before Michelle finally said, "I understand. I just hate seeing you both go through this." I thanked her and hung up, realizing that the true colors of the people around me were starting to show. Some were loyal, supportive, and genuinely concerned. Others, like Michelle, seemed more interested in playing peacemaker, ignoring the weight of Lisa's betrayal. Meanwhile, Jake had become my unofficial therapist. Each night after work, we'd sit on his porch with a couple of beers, and I'd unload everything on my mind. "Lisa's trying to spin this like I'm the one walking away from her," I vented one evening. "She's telling people I didn't give her a chance to fix things." "Classic deflection," Jake said, shaking his head. "She doesn't want people to know the real reason you left. That's on her, man, not you." He was right, but it didn't make it easier. I hated the idea of people pitying Lisa, thinking I'd abandoned her without cause. But I also knew the truth would come out eventually. It always did. The tipping point came later that week when I got a text from one of Lisa's friends, Maddie. "Hey Mark. I heard what happened. I just wanted you to know that I'm on your side. I saw some of Lisa's messages with M. She's been lying to everyone, not just you." I stared at my phone, my pulse quickening. Maddie and Lisa had been friends for years. If even she was turning against her, it meant Lisa's house of cards was crumbling faster than I'd realized. "Thanks, Maddie," I replied. "I appreciate you telling me." She responded almost immediately, "You don't deserve what she did to you. If you need anything, let me know." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of vindication. Lisa's lies were unraveling, and she was losing the control she'd always wielded so effortlessly. It didn't erase the pain of her betrayal, but it reminded me that walking away had been the right decision. For the first time, I felt the faintest flicker of pride, not just for leaving, but for standing my ground. This wasn't just about escaping Lisa's deceit. It was about reclaiming my story, my life. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning. By Friday, Lisa's emails had shifted from desperate pleas to thinly veiled anger. "I don't understand how you could just walk away. After everything we've been through, you owe me a chance to explain. You're being cruel, Mark. Nobody's perfect, not even you." I ignored them, forwarding each one to my lawyer and blocking her address. My silence seemed to push her further, but I didn't care. The fewer avenues she had to reach me, the better. That evening, as I was getting ready to leave Jake's for a late-night drive, my new therapy, my phone buzzed. It was Lisa. I stared at her name on the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "What do you want, Lisa?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. There was a long pause before she spoke. I don't get how you can act like this doesn't matter," she said, her voice trembling. "We had a life together, Mark. You can't just erase that." "I'm not the one who erased it," I replied coldly. "You did that the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you." "I made a mistake," she snapped. "People make mistakes, Mark. You think you're so perfect? So above it all." "No," I said, my voice steady. "But I was faithful. I respected our marriage, and I expected the same from you." Clearly, that was too much to ask. She let out a bitter laugh. "You're so self-righteous. Do you even know what it's like to feel neglected? To feel like the person you love doesn't see you anymore?" "Don't twist this, Lisa," I said sharply. You didn't cheat because you felt neglected. You cheated because you wanted to. Because you thought you could get away with it. Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You don't even sound sorry, I continued, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. You're just mad you got caught. Of course I'm sorry, she said, her voice soft now. But you're not even giving me a chance to prove it. How can we fix this if you've already made up your mind? There's nothing to fix, I said, my tone final. You made your choice, and I made mine. It's over, Lisa. Before she could reply, I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. My heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The next day, the fallout began in earnest. Lisa's parents called again, this time pleading with me to reconsider. She knows she messed up, Evelyn said tearfully. But she's our daughter, Mark. She's trying to make things right. She's trying to save face, I corrected. That's not the same thing as making it right. Evelyn sighed heavily. I don't know what else to say. I just hate seeing both of you like this. So do I admitted. But this is the only way forward. Later that afternoon, Jake burst into the house, his phone in hand. You're not gonna believe this, he said, holding it out to me. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post, one of Lisa's mutual friends airing the drama publicly. I hate seeing people like Lisa act like the victim. Everyone in town knows what really happened. She cheated, and now she's mad Mark won't take her back. Actions have consequences, Lisa. I stared at the screen, a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction washing over me. Well, I said finally, I guess the truth's out. Jake nodded. You okay? Yeah, I said, setting the phone down. I think I am. Lisa had spent years crafting the perfect image of herself. Charming, likable, untouchable. Watching it crumble wasn't just satisfying. It was justice. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time, I felt like the storm was beginning to pass. The days that followed were surprisingly quiet. Lisa didn't call, text, or email, not that she could, with most of her contact avenues blocked. Mutual friends stopped pressing me for details, probably deterred by how firmly I'd shut down their previous attempts to mediate. It felt like I'd crossed some invisible threshold, stepping into a life where she no longer dictated my thoughts or actions. I threw myself into work, picking up extra projects to keep busy. In the evenings, I stayed at Jake's, sharing a beer and occasionally venting, but mostly focusing on what came next. I'd found a decent apartment on the other side of town, simple, clean, and mine. Jake helped me move in over the weekend, hauling boxes of books and furniture up a narrow staircase. By the end of it, we were both sweating and laughing, the tension of the last few weeks beginning to fade. Man, you've got a fresh start here, Jake said, dropping onto my new couch and cracking open a soda. This place is great. You're gonna do fine. I nodded, looking around the living room. It was bare, just a few essentials unpacked, but it felt good. Yeah, I said. It's not much, but it's a start. The first night in the apartment was strangely peaceful. I sat on the balcony, sipping a cup of tea and staring out at the city lights. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted, not in reaction to Lisa, but for me. I'd lost so much of myself in our marriage, bending to make her happy, sacrificing bits of who I was to keep the peace. Now, with nothing tying me to that life, the possibilities felt endless. But not everything was easy. On Monday, I ran into Lisa's brother, Tom, at the grocery store. We'd always gotten along well, and for a moment, I thought he might ignore me. Instead, he walked over, his face a mix of guilt and sadness. Hey Mark, he said. Can we talk? I hesitated but nodded. Sure. We stepped outside, away from the bustle of the store. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Tom began. For everything. I had no idea Lisa was doing what she was doing. If I'd known, I would have said something. I believe you, I said, my voice neutral. But it's not on you, Tom. This was her choice. He nodded, looking down at his feet. I don't know what's going on with her. She's been a mess since you left. Blaming everyone but herself, mostly. I hope you're okay. I'm better than I thought I'd be, I admitted. But I hope she figures things out. Not for me, just for herself. Tom looked relieved, clapping me on the shoulder. You're a good guy, Mark. I'm sorry it came to this. After he left, I stood in the parking lot for a moment, processing. It was strange to feel both vindicated and saddened by the conversation. Part of me still grieved the life I thought I had with Lisa, but the rest of me was ready to move forward. That evening, I got a text from Maddie, Lisa's friend. Just wanted to let you know Lisa's been talking about moving out of state. She says she wants a fresh start, but I think she's trying to escape the fallout. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the message, unsure how to feel. Relief? Closure? Finally, I replied, "Thanks for telling me. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for." When I set my phone down, I felt a weight lift. Lisa might run from the consequences, but I wasn't running from anything. This was my life now, quiet, messy, and entirely mine. And I was ready to embrace it. Over the next couple of weeks, I settled into my new life. The apartment felt more like home every day, and I'd started filling the empty spaces with little touches that were just mine. A framed map of places I wanted to visit, a few plants I'd probably forget to water, and a vintage record player I'd always wanted but never bought because Lisa thought it was impractical. At work, I found myself focusing more than I had in years. My boss noticed too, tossing me a few compliments during meetings. "Mark, you've been sharp lately. Glad to see you firing on all cylinders," he said one morning after I wrapped up a successful pitch. "Thanks," I replied with a genuine smile. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But it wasn't just work that was changing. I'd started reconnecting with old friends, people I hadn't seen much during my marriage. Lisa had always made it difficult, subtly steering me away from plans that didn't include her. Now, I was free to say yes. One Friday night, Jake and I went to a bar downtown, the kind of spot we used to hit before I got married. The place was buzzing with energy, music, laughter, the clink of glasses. For the first time in years, I felt like myself. We grabbed a table near the back, and after a few beers, Jake grinned at me. "So you gonna sit here all night, or are you actually gonna talk to someone?" I laughed. "It's been a while, man. I'm not exactly smooth anymore." He rolled his eyes. "Just go. You'll be fine." I glanced around the room, not really expecting to make a move. But then I noticed her, dark hair, an easy smile, and a laugh that seemed to carry over the noise of the bar. She was sitting with a small group, but something about the way she carried herself caught my attention. Jake followed my gaze and smirked. "There you go. Go say hi." After a bit of coaxing, I finally worked up the nerve to approach her. "Hi," I said, trying not to overthink it. "I'm Mark." She looked up, surprised but not unfriendly. "Hi, Mark. I'm Sarah." The conversation started slow, introductions, a few jokes about the music. But before I knew it, we were deep in a discussion about everything from travel to bad movie recommendations. "Do you come here often?" I asked, cringing at how cliché it sounded. She laughed. "Not really. My friend dragged me out tonight. I was going to stay home and binge a crime docuseries, but here we are." "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you came," I said, surprised at how natural the words felt. The rest of the night passed in a blur. When her friends decided to leave, Sarah lingered for a moment. "It was nice meeting you, Mark," she said, smiling. "Maybe I'll see you around." "Maybe," I said, handing her my phone. "Or maybe you'll text me." She laughed but typed her number in before heading out. Jake clapped me on the back as I returned to our table. "That's what I'm talking about, man. See? You've still got it." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. When I got home that night, I sat on the balcony again, looking at the city lights. Meeting Sarah wasn't just about the possibility of something new, it was a reminder that I wasn't stuck. My life was mine to rebuild, piece by piece, one small step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. Over the next week, I found myself texting Sarah. Nothing too heavy, just light conversations about her favorite books, random memes, and the occasional sarcastic comment about how she still hadn't finished her crime docuseries. I didn't feel rushed. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove myself or make something work. It was just easy. One evening, after work, she sent me a text. "I'm craving tacos. Know any good spots?" I smiled, typing back, "I might. But you'll have to let me show you." Her reply came almost immediately, "Deal. Tomorrow." The idea of going on a date felt strange. I hadn't been on one since before Lisa, and part of me wondered if I was ready. But then I thought about everything I'd been through, how far I'd come, and decided I owed it to myself to try. The next day, I left work early to pick out something decent to wear, a dark blue button-down and jeans that Jake assured me looked approachable but not boring. We met at a small taco joint downtown. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting at an outdoor table with a margarita in hand. "Hey," she said, smiling as I approached. "Hey," I replied, sitting down across from her. The conversation flowed easily, just like it had at the bar. We joked about the menu, shared stories about terrible first dates, and debated whether pineapple belonged on tacos. It doesn't, by the way. By the time the check came, I realized I hadn't thought about Lisa once. For months, she'd been a shadow over everything I did, but sitting there with Sarah, I felt like I was finally stepping into the light. As we walked out of the restaurant, she turned to me. "Thanks for dinner. I had a great time." "Me too," I said. "Maybe we can do it again sometime?" She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'd like that." I walked her to her car, and as she got in, she paused. "You're different, you know that?" In a good way. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I just smiled and said, "Thanks." On the drive home, I thought about her words. Different. Maybe I was. 4 years, I'd been defined by my marriage, by my role as Lisa's husband. Now I was starting to find out who I was without her, and it felt freeing. Back at the apartment, I texted Jake to let him know how the date went. "That's my boy," he replied. "So when's the wedding?" I rolled my eyes and laughed, typing back, "Slow down, man. It's just tacos." But even as I joked, I couldn't ignore the spark of hope that had ignited in me. The night ended with a text from Sarah. "Thanks again for dinner. I haven't laughed that much in ages. Sleep well, Mark." "You too," I replied, smiling as I set my phone down. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. And it felt damn good. Over the next few weeks, life began to feel normal again, normal in a way I hadn't felt in years. Work kept me busy during the day, and evenings were spent filling my new apartment with small comforts, a lamp from a thrift store, a rug that tied the room together, and photos of places I planned to visit. Sarah and I texted regularly, and while we hadn't gone on another date yet, there was no rush. I liked the pace we were moving at, easy, natural, without pressure. One Saturday, she sent me a picture of her dog sprawled across her couch with the caption, "I tried to clean. He had other plans." I laughed, replying, "Looks like he's in charge now. You're just a guest in his kingdom." Her quick response made me grin. "I feel like that sometimes. Anyway, when are we getting tacos again?" We made plans for the following week, but what surprised me most was how comfortable I felt about it. I wasn't overthinking or comparing it to my past. For the first time in a long time, I was just enjoying the moment. Lisa, on the other hand, had gone quiet. Mutual friends told me she'd started packing up the house, preparing to move out of town. I didn't feel relief or anger, just indifference. She was no longer my problem, and that realization brought a deep sense of peace. That night, as I sat on my balcony with a beer, I let the cool air wash over me. The pain, the betrayal, the doubts, they were still there, but they were smaller now. Manageable.